Hi again. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the Neapolitan chord, a very interesting chromatic chord that's going to naturally follow from the modal mixture topic that we just got through. So the Neapolitan, we're just talking about one chord here. So pretty simple. The basics, the Neapolitan, as many of you probably know, is a major triad built on flat scale degree 2. So the Roman numeral is flat 2. Some books give it an N for Neapolitan, but I think it's much better to just put flat 2 for the Roman numeral. So major triad built on flat 2. In minor keys, this chord requires only one accidental, which is flat scale degree 2. So it happens more naturally in a minor key. This is my key. There's the flat 2 chord. Whereas in a major key, or in major keys, it requires flat 2 and flat 6. So it's actually not that common in major keys. This is your tonic chord. There's the Neapolitan. It's kind of a shocking sounding chord. It involves barring also flat scale degree 6. Whereas in a minor key, all you need is flat 2. So some call this also the Phrygian 2 chord, because it would be diatonic in the Phrygian mode that has a flat 2. Now, usually this chord occurs in first inversion as flat 2 6, which gives it the term Neapolitan 6th chord. And that's the main chord we're going to talk about in terms of part writing, is the Neapolitan 6, the flat 2 6 chord. All right, in classical music, the Neapolitan chord has a predominant function. Okay, that's very important. That's all it is, predominant function. And it'll be used as a substitute for diatonic predominant chords, like 2 diminished 6 and 4. Now that relationship is going to be very important. We're going to actually end up voice leading this chord the same way we do those diatonic predominants. It actually only differs from those by one note. Now to demonstrate this, let's look at Beethoven's famous Moonlight Sonata. Right here I've labeled where the Neapolitan comes in. So we're in the key of C sharp minor. Therefore, flat scale degree 2 in C sharp minor will be D natural, right? And then you notice right here we get a D major chord with the F sharp in the bass. So that's your flat 2 6. Then it moves straight on to 5 7. Okay. Now let me play this for you as written first. Then I'm going to show you just how similar this sounds to an ordinary 4 chord or a 2 chord. So as written. Here it comes. So this chord here was the Neapolitan to 5. Now here's what just an ordinary 4 would have sounded like. Here's what a 2 diminished 6 would sound like. Right, all very similar. And then here's the Neapolitan again. The Neapolitan just sounds a little more expressive. The term, by the way, is often referring to Neapolitan operas. So Naples. And a lot of times this chord is used to describe sort of like a ghostly effect. All right, so again, predominant function is all we're dealing with here. So let's talk about the Neapolitan 6th and how to voice and voice lead the chord. Now, as you're gonna recognize from these rules a lot of similarities with stuff I told you already about 4 chords and 2 6 chords. All these chords are going to have scale degree 4 in the bass. So first off, double the bass, just like you do with the 4 and the 2 6 chord. Now try to avoid voicing a perfect 5th. Now that's with the rest of the chord. And I recommend putting flat 2 in the soprano, but this is not required. The reason you don't want to voice a perfect 5th is that a lot of times it causes parallel 5ths. So just make sure you don't have a perfect fifth in your voicing. Number 2, in resolving to 5, move the upper voices in contrary motion to the bass. All right? Upper voices in contrary motion to the bass, just like you did with the ordinary 2, 6, or the 4 chord. And then you're going to notice that flat scale degree 2 moves to scale degree 7, and that's going to create a melodic diminished third. Let me show you the kind of standard progression here. So we're in C minor. Notice that I doubled the bass. I doubled the note F, and then I moved the upper voices in contrary motion to the bass. And notice how my soprano goes flat to D flat to B natural, creating a diminished third. That's what you want to happen. You don't want to try to avoid that. Basically, if you do anything different than this, you're going to end up with so many part writing problems. So you really have to follow these instructions. Okay? I'll play you that in a second, but let me talk about the other 2 options before I play all 3 of these. Now we have this diminished third right here. Sometimes composers like to fill in that space. I mean, it's not hard to sing. You'll find that's actually pretty easy to sing. Kind of chromatically encircles the tonic, Ra to T. But let's say you want to fill that in. You can create the melodic line. This is number 4. You can create the melodic line flat 2, 1, 7. So scale degree 1 kind of passes in between scale degree flat 2 and scale degree 7. Now, if you're going to do that, there's kind of 2 options that composers like. One is to use the cadential 6/4 to harmonize scale degree 1, the passing scale degree 1. And the other one is a 7 diminished 7 of 5. Now, what's nice about the 7 diminished 7 of 5 is notice how it creates this rising chromatic bass line, Fa, Fi, Sol, going against Ra, Do, Ti. So you get this really nice wedge motion in the outer voices when you do that. Be careful. I know it's a little hard to tell how far I wrote this. This is actually an A natural there. Be careful in your spelling of the 7 diminished 7 of 5. All right, let me play all 3 of these. First off, the standard example. Here's our key. Here's just the standard one. So here's the diminished third. And then if you want to fill that in, you can use the cadential 6/4. Or you can do that passing 7 diminished 7 of 5. That last one's a really nice effect, I think, with all the kind of crunchy chromatic motion with the outer voices. All right, that's it from a part writing standpoint. It's actually very, very strict, though. Really have to follow those rules. All right, now we're going to go on to the next page. Go ahead and turn the page. What I want you to do, I'll play you this example, recording of this example from Schubert. The key is G minor, and I want you to locate all of the Neapolitan chords that you find, and then follow the voicing and voice leading, and see if the rules we just talked about are followed. Okay, so go ahead and turn the page. I'm going to play you this example. go ahead and pause the video and circle and label all the Neapolitan chords and take a look at the voice leading. All right, now that you've had a chance to look through these, I'm going to look just at the first. There's 3 spots where you have these, but the first and the third ones are pretty much identical. So let's look at the first one and the second one and see what Schubert does here. First one, you'll notice, follows the standard resolution. We double. It's kind of difficult to tell the doubling here because of there's multiple voices. But you'll notice in the soprano, flat scale degree 2, which is A flat, moves down to T. So I think it's in a different key than what I just played there. Now the second one right here, that's an example where we get the passing 7 diminished 7 of 5. So notice how the bass goes Fa, Fi, Sol, and the soprano goes Ra, Do, Ti, that kind of nice chromatic motion. But other than that, this pretty much follows the exact rules we talked about. And there you can tell the doubling a little better. You can see that he doubled the note C, or really tripled the note C. Though really the bass is just an octave doubling. And followed the exact voice leading pattern that I showed in the earlier example. And then the last one, like I mentioned, is pretty much identical to the first. So in other words, he uses a couple of the options and follows the basic voice leading guidelines. Now that kind of concludes the basics of the Neapolitan 6. Now let's go on and talk about some other things you can do with this chord. So next up, 3 other uses of the Neapolitan that I thought I'd mention to you. These are all, relatively common, not as common as the first option, the kind of standard Neapolitan 6th. Now, one thing that you occasionally find is that the Neapolitan may occur in root position. There's no rule against doing this. There's just a couple little odd things about the root position Neapolitan. One is that the bass will leap a tritone when it resolves to 5. You're going to get this tritone leap in the bass, flat 2 to scale degree 5. Secondly, though, if you're going to part write this, it's okay to double the root. I mean, there's nothing about flat scale degree 2 that says you can't double it. In this case, if it's in root position, go ahead and double that note so you can have multiple flat scale degree 2s in your texture. So an example of this is over here. This is in the key of C minor, so an easy key to learn. And in this final little progression from this piece by Chopin, you'll notice that we get 6, flat 2 in root position, 5, 1. Notice how the bass is, this is that circle of fifths kind of bass thing, right? I go down a perfect fifth here, but then I have a tritone. If I do the flat 2 to 5, that's going to create a tritone in the bass. And that's going to be one awkward little thing about this. But you'll notice that Chopin does have multiple D flats in the texture, but this is perfectly allowed. Let me play this for you. I will be playing this in I'm playing the last 2 measures. So key of C minor, and again, I'm going to reduce this a little bit. Last 2 measures. So here's the Neapolitan, and then the tritone, the bass. Very striking effect when you use it in root position. All right, so that's one thing that you might find with a Neapolitan. No big deal, really, right? Now, the next thing has a little something to do with what we just talked about. Second thing is that flat 2 may also be tonicized, or can be used as a key area. So in other words, you could get a 5-7 of flat 2. Which brings us to our next question. Let's imagine we're in the key of F major. Which scale degree would be the root of 5-7 of flat 2? Pause your video and think about it. Okay, now I suppose the actual key didn't matter. Any major key, basically, or minor key, I suppose, in the abstract. What scale degree would be the root of flat 5/7 of flat 2? The answer was flat 6. Okay, so this has something to do with what we talked about with the modal mixture. The chord before flat 2 would be flat 6. So this can easily kind of be blended in with some modal mixture. And so if you take, the flat scale degree 6 chord or the flat 6 chord, and you add a minor 7th above it, you'll create a secondary dominant of flat 2. Up here, for example, this 6 chord prior to the flat 2, if I just put, this is an A flat major chord, if I just put a G flat in there, that would have made a 5/7 of flat 2. These things are closely related. Keep this in mind. It will come back when we talk about our next topic. So this is what I originally played. 6, 6, flat 2, 5, 1. But I could have done this. 5/7 of 2, flat 2. Sorry, man, 5/7 of flat 2, and then 5. Right, just sounds a little bit different. And so you actually build the secondary dominant of flat 2 on scale degree flat 6. In a minor key, that note's already flatted, of course. All right, finally, third thing, and you probably would have predicted this from what we talked about in the last lecture. Flat 2 can also be used as a pivot chord in a modulation. It can become some diatonic chord usually in the new key, perhaps as a predominant. Now let me show you what I mean here with this next question. Go ahead and turn to the score on the next page of the handout. I want you to analyze the modulation in this piece. The original key is C minor, and I want you to be on the lookout for a chromatic pivot chord, and as you might imagine, it's going to have something to do with the Neapolitan. All right, so turn the page. I need to fast forward a little bit to find this spot. I'll tell you when it comes in. Right on here. Okay, I'll stop us right there. We ended there in a different key than we began. So work your way through that. Go ahead and pause the video and be on the lookout for a chromatic pivot chord. Okay, here we go. Now this pivot chord really stood out because it was a kind of striking chromatic chord. I'm in C minor, so key of C minor. Then I go to flat scale degree 2, flat 2, 6. Then I modulate to A flat major. So flat 2, the D flat chord becomes 4, 6 in the key of A flat. So D flat would be a 4 chord in A flat. Then we go up to 5, 6, 5, and then to 1. You'll notice that Beethoven produces a really nice stepwise bass line here. E flat, F, G, A flat. So you get this nice, we're in the key of C minor, then we get this, and instead of going on here and staying in C minor, we go 1, 6, flat 2, 6, becomes 4, 6, 5, 6, 5 to 1. So very clever modulation there with the stepwise bass. So of course, just as was true for the borrowed chords as pivots, when you use the Neapolitan, the thing that really stands out first is the chromatic chord. It's not like the normal diatonic pivot chord when it's more likely to be the 5 of the new key that stands out. So again, this lecture we learned about kind of the standard flat 2-6 as a predominant, and then we learned a few other options like root position, flat 2, the tonicized flat 2, and using flat 2 as a pivot.